Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished participants. I declare open the first session of the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group for the elaboration of a legally binding instruments on the promotion and protections of the human rights of older persons. Our working group, established by Human Rights Council Resolution 5813, is mandated to elaborate and submit to the Human Rights Council a draft international legally binding instrument on the human rights of older persons with the objective of promoting, protecting, and ensuring the full enjoyment of human rights by older persons. I have the pleasure of welcoming the Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mrs. Aguadabo, who is with us this morning to delivering open remarks. Deputy High Commissioner, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, good afternoon. It is an honor to join you today at the opening of this first session of the Intergovernmental Working Group mandated to elaborate a legally binding instrument on human rights of older persons. This initiative comes at a decisive moment. Across the globe, a profound demographic transformation is underway. Population aging is no longer a trend confined to a few regions. By the late 2070s, the global population aged 65 and older is projected to surpass the number of children under the age of 18 worldwide. This structural shift will have far-reaching implications for our societies, for health and long-term care systems, for labor markets and pension systems, for family structures and care responsibilities, for humanitarian response, and centrally, for the daily enjoyment of human rights by older persons. Currently, ageism and discrimination, violence, neglect and abuse, inadequate social protection, gaps in health and long-term care, and barriers to meaningful participation remain widespread. These are not isolated issues. They appear across very different legal, economic, and cultural contexts, and they point to the same underlying problem, that older persons too often remain invisible in the interpretation, implementation, and enforcement of rights. This is precisely why a dedicated legal instrument on the human rights of older persons is needed. Older persons are already rights holders under the international law of human rights. But the existing framework was not designed with the specific and cumulative forms of discrimination and exclusion that they experience. As a result, important protection often remains implicit, unevenly applied, or difficult to claim in practice. A legally binding instrument would change this. It would provide older persons and organizations that represent them a concrete legal basis on which to claim their rights, and give states a clear framework around which to build law and policy and services. It would also inform budgetary and programmatic choices and provide a reference point across different national contexts. By establishing this working group, the Human Rights Council entrusted you with an ambitious mandate, bringing us closer than ever to ensuring that older persons are able to enjoy all of their human rights. Our office stands ready to support this process. We look forward to walking this path together with member states, civil society, and older persons organizations in the months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy High Commissioner.
Thank you.
I'm aware of the fact that you have to go.
I'll go after your
statement. Okay. I'm going to switch to Spanish. Excellencias.
Excellencies, Deputy High Commissioner, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I want warmly to thank all of you for being here and warmly welcome those who are representing states and national institutions to participate in this first session. And the many NGOs who have been supporting this process. Every presence requires a personal and institutional and family-based effort. So your participation is not a mere act of being here, but a demonstration of commitment by all of your governments to this process. It is an honor, likewise, to have with us here today the Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights. Her vast experience in the multilateral system and in promoting and protecting human rights are a reference point for all of us. We thank her for being here with us at this important time and wish her every success in this. We also warmly thank the new secretary. Many of you know him and his track record in the Office of the High Commissioner. His knowledge of the system and his commitment will provide invaluable support to the development of our work. I thank you. Colleagues, today we're not just inaugurating a session, but a process which has been awaited for many years by national human rights institutions, states, civil society organizations, and millions of older persons throughout the world, looking to the international community to continue strengthening the protection of their rights. The path has not been a short one. It has required patience, perseverance, and ability to build bridges among different partners. This is what makes this moment so important, because in multilateral processes, they can never arise from improvisation. They require years of work behind the scenes, discussions, and a shared conviction that certain challenges deserve to be addressed hand in hand. The relevant resolution of the Human Rights Council, adopted by consensus and with broad support by states, has given us a clear mandate. The mandate does not belong only to those who were behind the initiative, but to all of us. And this is what is the strength of the process. I want to thank the ambassadors who have placed confidence in me to lead this Intergovernmental Working Group. I take this up with humility, impartiality, and the conviction that the chair's role is not to lead states to a predetermined conclusion, but to lay the foundations for states to build it, to build through dialogue a result that belongs to everybody. I will also want to express thanks to the core group of Brazil, Slovenia, Philippines, Gambia, and my own country. Over the years, these countries have kept the initiative alive with unflagging perseverance. I thank those delegations and everybody who has contributed to bringing this about. And I also want to thank the Office of the High Commissioner, national human rights institutions, civil society, and particularly the many older persons who are now here in the room and following our work from different points around the globe. This is what is the purpose of this negotiation. International treaties are not an academic exercise. They're not merely legal texts, they're instruments designed to improve the lives of people. And this always must be our goal. During this week, we will start formally negotiations. It's going to require patience, creativity, and long-term vision. No international instrument can be built in a few days. Lasting agreements are those that have mutual respect, the ability to hear one another and to understand before trying to convince. So we have designed a program that makes it possible to hear the largest possible number of voices. We will hear states. We will hear the contributions received in the intersessional period, and we will look at the history of the process. Any negotiation has a memory, and this must be recognized in order to move forward. We're not here to start once again from zero, but to build on the progress already made, draw on the lessons learned, and look at the debates that have helped us to clarify, to hold dialogues based on an understanding of the international human rights system. International mechanisms are facing major challenges: limited resources, increasing demands, the ongoing need to adapt to a world that is changing at great speed. But above all at this time, we see the greatest opportunities to innovate. We can reflect not only on the content of the future instrument, but also on how we imagine its implementation. We can think about how to build a more efficient, accessible, sustainable mechanism, more prepared in order responsibly and transparently to address the technological tools that are now transforming the ways that societies work. Our objective is not just to address the needs of the present, but also to prepare a system that can meet the needs of the future. This is a space to consider together the next steps to take. I understand entirely that many of you want to know how we're going to move forward. That is natural. Any process requires predictability, but it is also clear that no calendar can replace political will, and commitment must be there must be a commitment, responsibility to use the time of the resources that states have provided, so that each meeting provides added value, and every stage brings us further to fulfillment of the mandate. Distinguished colleagues, the multilateral negotiations can bring unpredictability. Sometimes they go better, sometimes less so, but it is not possible to abandon ship. We must maintain our course with confidence, recalling the goal that brings us together. This goal is to build an instrument that strengthens the dignity, protection, and the rights of millions of older persons globally. This responsibility is too great for any of us alone, but together, on the basis of respect, openness, and a genuine will to cooperate, I am convinced that we can achieve the mandate and the that the Human Rights Council has placed in our hands. And I call on you to start this week with ambition, pragmatism, and hope. The best pages of multilateralism were not written by those who thought the same way. It's possible to think in different ways and to build step by step a shared future. I thank you all.
And now we move to agenda item 2 on the adoption of the agenda and program of work for the first session of the working group. The draft program of work for this session has been placed on the web page of the working group. Are there any questions or comments with regard to the draft program of work? I don't see any delegation wishing to take the floor. May I take it that the working group is ready to adopt the agenda and program of work for the first session? I see no objection. It is so decided. As far as the modalities for this working group are concerned, I would like to remind you that the speaking time limit will be 3 minutes for the interventions. That's for the state and international organizations, and are asked to raise their name, please, to inscribe on the list of speakers. Other stakeholders are requested to confirm their speaking slot at the list of speakers desk in the room 15 minutes before the beginning of the debate. As announced at the organizational session in February 2026, national human rights institutions, civil society organizations, and other relevant stakeholders will have the opportunity to speak at the end of each item or sub-item on our agenda. We'll now proceed to a general debate on the structure and guiding principles of a future instrument under item 3 of our agenda and in accordance with our program of work. I would like to give the floor now to whoever wants to participate. The floor is open, and I'll give you the floor to distinguished representative of Chile. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chairperson, and congratulations on your election. Chile recognizes the urgent need for a legally binding international instrument that clearly defines the rights of older persons and states' obligations for their effective enjoyment, as well as the strengthening protection thereof. On the basis of our national experience, we propose that the future instrument should involve a paradigm change as seen in Chile with the adoption of the law on an active, healthy life. We believe that the principles and the 15 specific rights in the law provide good practice to be taken into account in defining international treaty. First, this sees older persons as rights holders and active participants in society, overcoming the paternalistic model that provided assistance and protection. We seek to overcome discrimination against older persons. Chronological age cannot be used to categorize and segregate. This type of discrimination with stereotypes and prejudices erodes intergenerational solidarity and is an obstacle to measures that provide a healthy, active life. Furthermore, the Inter-American Convention on the Protection of the Rights of Older Persons shows the right to independence and autonomy with a model that deserves to be replicated and amplified globally. A new legally binding instrument must eliminate places where general normative frameworks have not been enough, providing friendly societies that guarantee protection against violence, be they institutional, financial, digital, or other. In this context, we note the digital gap and the ethical challenges. For Chile, designed implementation of policies under such a global instrument must directly involve older persons and civil society at every stage of decision-making, guaranteeing that state responses address their needs and their real aspirations. President, Chile reiterates its commitment to the process, a legally binding instrument that will not only establish normative standards where we currently have gaps, but will be the central mechanism for raising global awareness, promoting social participation, and ensuring for all true dignity in society. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Chile, and I congratulate you on this new law on a decent life, which can be taken as an example by many other delegations. Thank you.
Distinguished Representative of Portugal, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Portugal thanks you for putting forward a food for thought paper. We welcome the convening of this first session of the working group, and we wish to reaffirm our strong support to the mandate of the working group. Portugal is advancing the human rights of older persons through the recently adopted Statute of the Elderly, preventing institutionalization, abuse and neglect, supporting integrated care and promoting autonomy. Mr. Chair, allow me to present a few remarks both on the contents and on the structure of the legally binding instrument. Firstly, on the contents. The instrument should be guided by a clear human rights-based framework that recognizes older persons as full rights holders entitled to the equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms on an equal basis with others and without discrimination, while also clarifying areas where further normative development is needed. It should move away from needs-based and medicalized approaches and instead affirm that the barriers faced by older persons stem from social, legal, environmental, economic, and institutional factors that limit the full enjoyment of rights and participation in society. It should also affirm the importance of full, meaningful, and effective participation of older persons and their representative organizations, including through consultation, co-design, and co-decision mechanisms. Secondly, on the structure. The Convention should adopt a clear, coherent, and comprehensive framework consistent with the architecture of existing human rights treaties while remaining responsive to the specific protection gaps that continue to leave older persons insufficiently protected. A possible structure fully detailed in our written submission could include 1, a preambular section recognizing ageism as a major cause of discrimination, exclusion, and denial of rights. 2, purpose, scope, and definitions, setting out the object and scope of the Convention, general principles, and general obligations of the state parties. 3, a set of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, clarifying their application in the context of older age and identifying areas where further normative development is required. And 4, implementation, monitoring, accountability, and final provisions. Mr. Chair, let me conclude. I agree with you. We still have a long road ahead. Portugal is ready to do its part, and we call on other UN entities, civil society, academia, and other relevant stakeholders to support states in pursuing the mandate Resolution 58/13 gave us. We look forward to engaging constructively in this week's discussion, and I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Portugal, for your statement and your contribution to this process and your support. Now I give the floor to distinguished representative of Brazil. You have the floor.
Chair, we are at the beginning, middle, and beginning. Tal Antônio Bispo dos Santos Nego Bispo remind us that the time is cyclical and their age represents not only the years we have lived, but also our ways of knowing, life experience, and collective memory. The world is undergoing profound demographic transformation, marking by increasing longevity in the coexistence of multiple generations. Yet, this process exists alongside persistent inequalities. Many social groups still do not reach old age because of vulnerabilities and discrimination accumulated through their lives. This reality underscores the need for human rights-based approach that recognize the diversity and aging process. With a global population of approximately 1.22 billion people aged 16 and over, it's essential to strengthen cooperation among states, international organizations, civil society, academia, and all other actors committed in promoting and protecting the rights of the older person. The future United States International Convention of the Human Rights of the Older Person represents a historic opportunity to consolidate this shared commitment. The principle of this instrument should constitute its normative foundation, guide its interpretation, implementation, and monitoring. In this regard, Brazil proposed that the convention build upon the progress already achieved by the International Convention on the Protection of the Human Rights of the Other Person, incorporating principles such as dignity, autonomy, independence, equality, and fight against the agents and multi-forms of discrimination, participation in social inclusion, recognition of the contributions of the older person, acknowledgement of the care as a human right, social protection, safety, and access to justice, gender equality, and the life course approach, intergenerational solidarity, respect for cultural diversity, special attention to those in the situation of greater vulnerability. The primary responsibility of the state is guarantee rights, response to impacts of climate change and forced displacement, and promote of lifelong learning in digital inclusion. Incorporation of these principles will enable the development and comprehensive international instruments capable of guiding legislations, public policies, and monitoring mechanisms aimed to ensure the dignity, autonomy, equality, participation, and safety of the older person, helping to ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, distinguido representante.
I thank Brazil. That is a very comprehensive approach to the rights of older persons. South Africa, please.
Thank you, Chair Rapporteur. We welcome the convening of this first session of the Intergovernmental Working Group and commend the Human Rights Council for establishing this important process through Resolution 58/13. This is timely and necessary step towards addressing long-standing normative gap in the international human rights system. Older persons are not passive recipients of care or charity. They are rights holders, entitled to the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms. Yet millions continue to face discrimination, abuse, neglect, exclusion, poverty, and barriers to justice simply because of their age. As we often say, a society reveals its true character, not by how it treats its strongest members, but how it protects those most vulnerable. If rights diminish with age, then they were never truly rights at all. South Africa therefore strongly supports the elaboration of a comprehensive, legally binding international instrument on the promotion and protection of human rights of older persons. We particularly welcome the Chair's food for thought paper, which provides a useful and pragmatic basis for our discussions. Its emphasis on not building from scratch is very important. In our view, the instrument should build on existing international human rights law while responding directly to the realities of aging. It should include a clear preamble, definitions where necessary, general principles, substantive rights, implementation and monitoring provisions, and final clauses. Such an instrument must be grounded in dignity, equality, autonomy, participation and non-discrimination, accessibility, accountability, and intergenerational solidarity. It must explicitly address ageism and recognize that older persons are not a homogeneous group. The treaty should reflect the lived realities of older women, persons with disabilities, rural older persons, those in institution, and those requiring support. South Africa further believes that the instrument should translate existing rights into concrete obligation for states. It should strengthen access to justice, recognize supported decision-making, and respect for will and preferences, and addresses care as a human rights issue and shared responsibility of families, communities, and the state. It will also give due attention to digital inclusion, health, long-term care, and protection from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. South Africa also supports the robust implementation and monitoring arrangements, including periodic state reporting, independent oversight, and meaningful participation by older persons and civil society. This is an opportunity to ensure that advancing in age never means diminishing in rights. As member states, we should engage constructively and ambitiously so that we can deliver a strong, practically and truly transformative legally binding instrument for present and future generations of older persons. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of South Africa. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Austria. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Austria aligns itself with the statement to be delivered by the European Union and wishes to add the following in its national capacity. Austria warmly welcomes the first substantive session of the Intergovernmental Working Group on the Human Rights of Older Persons. The establishment of this working group marks an important step towards addressing long-standing gaps in the international human rights framework and towards clarifying how universal human rights apply in older age. We would also like to thank the Chair and the Secretariat for the call for input and for the efforts made to gather views from states, United Nations entities, civil society, older persons, and their representative organizations. Austria notes the inclusion of older persons in the program of this session and encourages further efforts to ensure their visibility and participation. Their meaningful participation is essential for the legitimacy and quality of this process. At the same time, we would like to note that the preparation of the first session has been challenging. Substantive documents were made available only at the very late stage. This made it difficult for capitals, experts, and stakeholders to prepare in depth and to coordinate positions in advance. We would also have welcomed a stronger and more visible participation of national human rights institutions in the panels, giving their important role in monitoring and promoting human rights at national level. Austria therefore hopes that this first session will not only allow for a general exchange of views, but will also help us to agree on a clearer roadmap for the next steps. By the end of this week, it should be clear how the working group intends to proceed, how inputs will be reflected, and how the process will move towards more structured and eventually text-based discussions. For Austria, the future legally binding instrument should be firmly grounded in the existing international human rights framework. It should not weaken or duplicate existing standards, but clarify their application in older age, serve as a common denominator and central reference point, address normative and implementation gaps, and act as a guiding light for the core human rights of older persons, while providing clearer guidance on the obligations of states. Austria attaches particular importance to dignity, autonomy, equality, and non-discrimination, participation, protection from violence and abuse, access to justice, effective monitoring, and the meaningful involvement of older persons throughout the process. We also believe that ageism must be addressed as a structural driver of discrimination and human rights violations. Demographic change is transforming our societies, including in Austria and in Europe. The human rights response must therefore focus not only on aging as a problem, but on removing the barriers, stereotypes, and discriminatory structures that prevent older persons from fully enjoying their rights. Austria looks forward to engaging constructively throughout this session. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. I must tell you that you may be right in make these observations about the process and some documents that then come right on time. But I must remind you that this process, it took like more than a decade in New York, and as soon as arrived in Geneva, we moved as fast as we could. And this is a very important process, and sometimes it takes time, but we are not slow. I mean, we're moving very fast, to the extent that you could see that as soon as this process arrived in Geneva, immediately was approved by the by consensus by the Human Rights Council. So we're all impatient. I mean, but this is a process that takes time. We are not with the idea to keep spending or wasting time. But I mean, you have to have also tolerance, patience, and it's the only way that we can actually build up a process like this together. Thank you. Now I give you the floor to distinguished representative of Guatemala. Tiene la palabra.
Guatemala, please. Chairperson, we wish to congratulate you on chairing this first session and express Guatemala's support to our work. My delegation welcomes the opportunity to participate in this historic process. After years of dialogue and reflection, we are starting the process of creating a legally binding instrument aimed at strengthening the protection of the human rights of older persons. Our country will participate in constructive spirit and with the firm conviction that aging with dignity must be a guaranteed right for all persons. We believe that the future convention should reaffirm universally recognized human rights and respect the nature of progressiveness, responding to the protection gaps facing older persons. The instrument must overcome barriers and forms of discrimination. We emphasize that the inclusion of older women is essential to build a more equitable and inclusive society. In Guatemala, they represent 8.1% of the population. The state must recognize their right to dignified living conditions without discrimination or conditions of vulnerability. This process must be based on principles such as equality before the law, social justice, effective access to justice, autonomy and independence, free and informed consent, non-discrimination and social inclusion. It must also recognize the value of care as a shared responsibility, shared between the state, the family and society. We consider it essential that the process be carried out with the broad participation of older persons themselves, the competent national institutions and civil society. Their experience and contributions are crucial to build a legitimate, inclusive instrument capable of responding to the realities facing our societies. This process, Chairperson, is a pact between generations. Today, we begin the construction of a protection framework. Guatemala reiterates its commitment to supporting this process seriously and constructively so that the outcome can provide each older person on behalf of the state and society with the conviction of a truth that they are not alone and their dignity remains intact. I thank you. Thank you, Guatemala, for your contribution. Guatemala has a very solid national legislation, and there is also a process for the adoption of the Inter-American Convention on Older Persons, which is a very positive thing. It would be very useful if you could ensure that that takes place and continues, but I recognize that your domestic legislation is very solid. Ecuador now, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chairperson. My delegation thanks the Office of the High Commissioner for organizing this first meeting of the Intergovernmental Working Group. Under Resolution 5813, as a co-sponsor of that resolution, Ecuador reaffirms its full support to the mandate to elaborate an international legally binding instrument and hopes that all states, international organizations, civil society, and other relevant stakeholders take advantage of this meeting and this process to mark a milestone in the strengthening of international human rights law. Older persons are holders of all human rights. However, they continue to face specific obstacles to their full exercise. The barriers arising from rapid technological transformation and digitalization generate new forms of exclusion by hindering access to financial services, payment systems, health insurance, healthcare, public information, and administrative procedures. In addition, there are disproportionate risks of poverty and economic exclusion, the persistence of age-based discrimination in employment, and limitations on the exercise of the right to health, especially in the context of health emergencies, pandemics, humanitarian crises, and natural disasters. With a global population of older persons that will reach approximately 2.1 billion by 2050, as the Deputy High Commissioner stated, an international legal framework that responds to these challenges and strengthens the protection of older persons' rights is essential. Ecuador believes that this negotiation should not begin from scratch, but rather build on the progress already made in international human rights law and existing regional experiences, as well as national experience. As a state party to the Inter-American Convention on the Protection of the Human Rights of Older Persons, we reaffirmed that the future instrument must complement and strengthen the current legal framework, promoting dignity, autonomy, independence, participation, and inclusion of older persons with specific measures aimed at overcoming the protection gaps that still persist. Finally, Ecuador stresses the importance of guaranteeing the effective participation of older persons and the organizations that represent them, not only during the preparation of the instrument, but also in the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the public policies that states adopt in this area. We reiterate our full support for your leadership, Chairperson, and our readiness to work openly and constructively with all delegations to achieve a strong universal instrument to promote, protect, and guarantee the human rights of older persons. I thank you. Thank you, distinguished Representative Ecuador, for your contribution and your support to the process.
The translation didn't come through. Thank you, Chair. At the outset, I'd like to thank you and the other members of the core group for the arrangements made for the session and the documentation circulated last week. The EU looks forward to engaging with the working group to address protection gaps and to enhance the respect for, protection and fulfillment of the human rights of older persons. Mr. Chair, the EU remains fully committed to and active in promoting the full enjoyment of all human rights by older persons without discrimination. We support a human rights-based approach to aging that recognizes older persons as rights holders and active members of society. This includes ensuring meaningful participation, access, accessibility, and inclusion of older persons in all spheres of life, independent living, combating ageism and age discrimination, and addressing all forms of violence, neglect, and abuse, and exploitation. In our statement in February, we shared that within the European Union, we have a significant legislative and policy acquis benefiting older persons and spanning multiple issues. Meanwhile, in March 2026, the European Commission adopted a strategy on intergenerational fairness, which promotes a long-term intergenerational perspective in policymaking and seeks to ensure a fair balance of opportunities, rights, and responsibilities across generations. As populations age, it is increasingly important to promote the inclusion and participation of older persons and to address barriers to the full enjoyment of their rights. As the work of this IGWG commences, we look forward to the various discussions and presentations arranged and to the broad, meaningful participation by civil society organizations, representatives of older persons, including older persons with disabilities, and those facing intersecting vulnerabilities from all regions. We are grateful for the numerous submissions by stakeholders from around the world in response to the call for inputs on which we can draw upon. You will understand that we need more time to deliberate on the documentation before this session, notably your food for thought paper. Having said that, we underline once again that the development of standards relating to the rights of older persons must be based on and fully aligned with the international human rights law, including the CRPD, to which the EU is an early party to alongside its member states, as well as relevant regional instruments. In closing, Chair, we wish you much success in steering our work this week. In light of demographic trends and looking to the future of our societies, it is crucial to continue to uphold older persons' full enjoyment of human rights and to promote intergenerational fairness. Thank you so much, Chair.
Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of the European Union for the statement and for the support of the process and ongoing cooperation.
Ahora doy la palabra al distinguido
And I now call on Mexico.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chairperson Rapporteur, for giving us the floor. Mexico supports the mandate of this Intergovernmental Working Group to achieve a legally binding instrument. We welcome the holding of this first session. With this session, we continue making progress towards our shared objective of an instrument to uphold and protect the rights of older persons in all their diversity. The instrument must transform the way that societies consider aging. Older persons are not a burden. They are full holders of rights who actively contribute to cultural, economic, political, social, and community life. We recognize their full autonomy and legal capacity and guarantee their effective participation with the necessary legitimacy and effectiveness within the future instrument. We must combat ageism and ensure that older people have decent work, digital access. Mexico believes that the creation, strengthening, and transformation of care and support systems based on human rights, intersectional and designed around the gender perspective, contribute to the dignity of older persons and recognize their contribution to the well-being of and development of societies. This is a crucial aspect of the instrument. It will be essential to consider the existing normative provisions on care and the rights of older persons, including the advisory opinion of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, the recent resolution of the Human Rights Council on discrimination against women and girls in the context of care, and normative progress in the ILO and other bodies. These frameworks strengthen the obligation of states to move from care-based models to autonomy, dignity, and full participation of older persons in social, economic, and political life. Mexico reiterates its commitment to building a solid instrument that recognizes that dignity and rights are not reduced with age. I thank you.
Muchas gracias, distinguida representante.
I thank Mexico. Mexico took the initiative to make progress in its law linked on to older persons and created a national instrument for older adults, which is one of the few such institutions, I believe, that exist nationally addressing this issue specifically. Thank you very much for your participation. And I now call on Ireland.
Ireland welcomes the opportunity to participate in the first substantive session of the Intergovernmental Working Group and to advance the development of the general framework and guiding principles for a legally binding instrument on the human rights of older persons. Ireland is committed to promoting and protecting the rights of older persons. With increased longevity and population ageing, older persons are facing an increased risk of age discrimination. Discrimination on the basis of age and ageism is unacceptable. It violates older persons' fundamental rights to equality and human dignity. Ireland welcomes the development of standards that will seek to address and prevent ageism and age discrimination across all domains. We acknowledge that older persons are not an homogeneous group and that the discrimination that they may experience is often intersectional, based not only on age but on other factors such as gender or ethnic origin. The general framework of a legally binding instrument must affirm the autonomy and agency of older persons and support their full participation in the economy and society. Recognizing that aging is a natural and universal facet of the human condition, which is not confined to a specific age cohort, The instrument must present a future-oriented vision for change that is responsive to increasing longevity and diversity of older persons in ageing societies. Ireland further underlines its view that any new instrument should uphold the universality and indivisibility of human rights and be coherent with existing human rights commitments, including those set out in the UN CRPD and its optional protocol. Ireland looks forward to engaging meaningfully as the drafting process commences. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Ireland. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Togo. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Chairperson. Togo welcomes the efforts made by yourself, the Secretariat of the Intergovernmental Working Group, and all stakeholders for the holding of this first session in order to develop an international legally binding instrument on the rights of older persons. We attach particular importance to this opening session, which is a milestone in consolidating this progression towards upholding the rights of older persons. We believe that as regards the future instrument, the main international convention on conventions on human rights provide a relevant framework. We call for a text organized around general provisions setting out the substantive rights, obligations of states, parties, and mechanisms for follow-up and cooperation. We believe that the mechanism of periodic reports and a forum for exchange and cooperation on the rights of older persons are essential in line with the universities for older persons that Togo organizes nationally. Our delegation believes that the future instrument must uphold the dignity, inherent dignity of older persons, equality and non-discrimination, autonomy, full and effective participation in public life, and respect for consent and the will of older persons. We also call for a human rights-based approach which upholds gender equality and is sensitive to intersecting discrimination, including the rights of persons with disabilities, rural dwellers, and people living in poverty who deserve increased protection. The future instrument must also provide protection against violence, abuse, neglect, and exploitation, including in the family, institutional, and community frameworks. It must explicitly set out certain specific rights, such as access to healthcare, social protection, justice, housing, adequate standard of living, long-term support and respect of older persons' dignity. And we must emphasize that participation by older persons themselves in the work and the representation by their associations is central, particularly as regards the functioning of the implementation and follow-up mechanism. Togo wishes to support this process and participate actively in the work of this session. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Togo. And I want to highlight something that is extremely important, and he may understand me clearly. Your participation, your message, your statement really has a tremendous significance. And I tell you why. Because there are many, many missions here who they don't count with many diplomats or they are lacking of human resources. On many occasions, for you to have an idea, we have the dilemma of what to attend first. What is the priority? In our case, for example, ambassador covering everything, WTO and the disarmament and everything. There are many delegations here that counts with 3 ambassadors, sometimes 2, and a lot of staff. So the fact that the delegations like Togo, many others that actually are here, giving the speech, giving the statement, I mean, you should really value a lot because just that, the fact that presence is a message. The message of interest, the message that actually is really committed with the process. And I encourage many other countries that have small delegations to participate actively in this process, because it really help us to see different the larger number of regions and countries participating, they will enrich even more and more this process that we just started. Thank you again, distinguished representative of Togo. Now I give you the floor to distinguished representative of
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is an honor to address you today. As you said, for more than a decade, Slovenia has been advocating for stronger protection of the rights of older persons. And this session is a joyous occasion for us. Today, we are starting to move from words to action to setting standards. And we move from aspiration to obligation. Despite the universality of human rights, older persons too often remain invisible within international legal frameworks. In times of swift demographic changes and an international framework that is uneven in the protection of human rights of older persons and at times blind to their specificities and vulnerabilities, Slovenia firmly believes these gaps and limitations in international human rights law must be comprehensively addressed. While existing treaties proclaim equality and non-discrimination, none contains comprehensive provision addressing ageism. A legally binding international convention on the rights of older persons will provide what is currently missing, a comprehensive framework of global standards. We need an instrument that will provide a strong legal framework to safeguard dignity, equality, and inclusion of older persons in practice, not just in principle. We see the new LBI as an integral part of the international human rights treaties, thus firmly grounded in human rights. As such, it can also offer a single platform for advocacy and a powerful instrument for accountability. Among general guiding principles, we prioritize non-discrimination, equality, including gender equality, respect for we can share good practices, learn from diverse legal traditions, and build consensus around principles that reflect our common humanity. We can demonstrate that to civil society, national human rights institutions, academia, and most importantly, it must be guided by the voices and lived experience of older persons themselves. Of the existing and past mechanisms and processes, including the findings of the open-ended working group on aging and the independent expert, relevant reports of the Office of the High Commissioner, as well as regional efforts and legal frameworks. We will actively engage longevity. We thus invite you all to engage constructively in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Slovenia. And I want to mention something that is extremely important. It's not automatic. And normally there are people behind. Not normally, always there are people behind. But there are some people who does more than others. And on this one of the major pillars in the person of the Ambassador Anita Pipan from Slovenia. She was always there pushing, really keeping this process alive. When everybody were discouraged, she was always there to make others to I can tell you without a doubt that Ambassador Pipan is the person. We owe her a lot as international community.
Admiration for the work of Ambassador Pipan. Malta aligns itself with the EU statement. We welcome the first formal session of the Intergovernmental Working Group on Older HRC, a draft binding instrument on the human rights of older persons. The Council also mandated that this future instrument would have group sessions. Elaborating a legally binding instrument is a laborious process, and we seek the Chair Rapporteur's wisdom and patience to guide this process. Years for this process to reach this point. Malta is proud to have done its part in 1969 at the UN General Assembly when it raised what at the time was termed protection but our aim remains the same, that of ensuring that older persons have and continue to have their rights protected in full without any form of discrimination. We see this as a major priority for this working group. Mr. Chair Rapporteur, the documents prepared by the Secretariat for this session are important because they set out the Mr. Chair Rapporteur, we thank you for circulating the food for thought paper, about which we will make more detailed comments under the relevant agenda item. Malta had also submitted a contribution which is reflected on the IGWG website. But also be able to reflect contemporary challenges, perhaps not fully envisaged in earlier years. We consider it expedient that through this process, an eventual instrument will be relevant then as it
Thank you, distinguished representative of Malta. Thank you for your contributions. And I give you the floor to distinguished representative of the Russian Federation. You have the floor.
Chair. important initiative and to underline our sincere commitment to engage constructively to this upcoming process. We strongly believe that the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons the Russian Federation will also be sharing its own best practices and achievements, including those which are contained in our national strategy on this matter. With regard to the core principles of the future convention, we believe they could be the concepts of older persons, equal opportunity, accessibility, equality between men and women. Furthermore, additional principles could be drawn from the Charter of Older ensuring a dignified experience, security, and the practical possibility of realizing the full human potential of older persons, and the 2015 Inter-American Convention on the Rights of Older Persons, which recognized the important role of international treaty. We believe that it would consist of the following elements: preamble articles concerning the general provisions such as purpose, definitions, general principles, general obligations, on conventional mechanisms, a conference of state parties to the international treaty, or a potential committee on the rights of older persons, as well as final clauses. Include or take other possible rights which could be enshrined in these legally binding documents. Among them, comes to freely choose their place of residence. During this session, we'll be presenting more inputs for this text, and for the sake of time, just keep it for later.
Thank you, Chair. The Jamaican delegation welcomes this opportunity to participate in this first substantive session of the IGWG, mandated to elaborate a legally binding international instrument for the promotion and protection of the Our delegation approaches this process guided by our 2021 national policy for senior citizens, which places strong emphasis on rights, responsibilities, and recognition of older persons' capabilities and contributions. We therefore affirm that the work of this IGWG must center on a comprehensive to any particular region. Jamaica is experiencing this rapid demographic shift. Older persons now represent nearly 14% of our population, and this figure is expected to reach closer to 20% by 2030. to aging, targeted evidence-based and rights-driven interventions would be required. For a part, Jamaica is currently taking steps to enact a comprehensive legislative framework by age, participation and inclusion, independence and autonomy, protection from all forms of abuse, violence, and exploitation, access to care, access to justice, and intergenerational the persons, monitoring and implementation, as well as final provisions. In closing, Chair, Jamaica stands ready to work with all delegations to ensure that we produce an instrument that meaningfully advances the dignity, rights, and well-being of older persons everywhere. We owe it to current and future generations to ensure that aging
support to this process. I now give the floor to distinguished representative of Iran. You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Rapporteur, Iran welcomes the convening of the first session as are respected members of society. They pass on knowledge, wisdom, and experience from one generation to another. They play an important role in families and communities. Therefore, any future instruments should be based on the dignity of older persons. Mr. Chair, as we discuss the right of older persons, we should also recognize the different situation faced by developing countries. Many the challenges cannot be addressed without stronger international cooperation. In this regard, we wish to highlight the harmful effects of UCMs, including equipment, assistive device, supportive technologies, and other basic goods needed by older persons. As a result, they directly affect the health, dignity, and quality of life right of older persons in other countries. States should ensure that their policies and measures do not hinder the enjoyment of human rights in either other older person. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Iran. Thank you for the statement. And I give the floor to distinguished representative of the Philippines. You have the floor.
aging is an inescapable global reality. A legally binding instrument codifying the rights of older persons and the corresponding obligations of duty bearers will provide a holistic and rights-based framework to respond to the challenges and opportunities presented by this demographic transition. The Philippines older persons everywhere so they can live in autonomy, dignity, and full participation in society. By reaffirming this agency, the instrument will reinforce a fundamental should underpin the LBI. They should be complemented by protection and procedural rights and guarantees, including access to affordable, humane, and dignified long-term care and palliative services. In this regard, their own dignity and well-being. Finally, the Philippines underscores the importance of an inclusive process where civil society, national human rights institutions, and other to deliver a robust, effective, and forward-looking instrument for the old of today and of future generations. Thank you.
Tiene la palabra.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chairperson. At the outset, congratulations on your election. We support this Intergovernmental Working Group and the need for an including human dignity, universality, equality, and non-discrimination, indivisibility and interdependence of human rights. It is crucial to incorporate progressiveness and non-regression, encouraging states involves ethnic origin, gender, or disability. The 5 pillars of the United Nations on the basis for older persons: independence, participation, care, self-realization, and dignity overlap accessibility and reasonable accommodations, guaranteeing access to physical environments, technology, and services, overcoming barriers to full participation. Of making care a human right with co-responsibility and recognition of unpaid care, incorporating trusting that this will lead to progress on a solid, comprehensive, transformative instrument that meets the current needs and ensures we also still had inside this process our colleague Ambassador Gayon, who is one that is to transform lives. When we seek to transform the lives has sound foundations. At the same time, we have excellent colleague. We are all aware of the need to work together, hand in hand, in order to ensure that this process may be
Mr. Chair, we wish to join others to congratulate you on your appointment as Chair Rapporteur of this working group. We count on your leadership in guiding this working group's deliberations in accordance with all other Indonesian citizens are legally protected, including inter alia their access to healthcare, employment, education, and social protection. Ensuring older persons' welfare is our development priority. Amending our law on older persons' welfare, reflecting our sustained and adaptive measure to further advance their fundamental rights. For us, their wisdom, knowledge, and experience continue to foster our families, communities, and national resilience, and remain an important source grounded in empirical needs and the lived experience of older persons. Second, it must avoid unnecessary duplications of established principles and provisions applicable to all persons under existing international human rights instruments. Third, it must be consensus-oriented, anchored in universal human rights while taking due account of national circumstances implementation and monitoring arrangement of the LBI. Creating undue additional burdens for states must be avoided, particularly amidst the ongoing UN liquidity among member states. Indonesia's commitment to advancing the right of older persons is firm, and we stand ready to engage in good faith in the work of this council, of this work.
Distinguished representative of Indonesia, and I give the floor distinguished representative of Thailand. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thailand join you and others working group on the human rights of older persons. Thailand advocates for a human rights-based approach as the overarching framework with regard to the structure and guiding principles of the future from mere recipients of welfare and protection to empower them as rights holders. To ensure consistency and reduce duplication, Thailand views that the structure of this new instrument must align with relevant existing frameworks, particularly the Madrid International Plan to our deliberations. First, holding human dignity, autonomy, self-reliance, and equality alongside efforts to reduce ageism. Second, ensuring comprehensive income security for an adequate standard of living and promoting preparation for the pre-aging population. Third, guaranteeing the right of older persons to live with their families, communities, and societies by supporting community-based care, promoting aging in place, and ensuring caregivers' rights and protections. Fourth, securing the right of age-friendly primary care, preventive health screenings, long-term care, and digital literacy. And seven, ensuring the right to adequate housing and supportive environments through the concept of universal design. Mr. Chair, we share your Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Thailand. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Iraq. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Iraq wishes to express its appreciation for the efforts to hold this first session of the open-ended working group on older persons in line with the resolution 58/13. We took note of the results and recommendations of the working group on aging and relevant reports, as well as participation of countries, relevant stakeholders, and the President paper on enriching the debate. We hope all these efforts will enrich the discussions, given that the paper includes consensual elements in line with the program of work. Chair, Iraq is fully aware of the importance of the working group's discussions, given that human rights treaties do not cover issues of older persons directly. And we see also an increase in the number of aging and an increase in normative gaps and protection. We call for also a drafting that complement gaps in existing treaties and while focusing on the right to difference in national capacities and reinforcing international cooperation and exchange of expertise while taking into account specificities of countries, while supporting the family as the cornerstone for the protection of the rights of other persons and their dignity. This meeting should focus on agreeing to a clear work methodology and a framework in order to better use time and resources and prepare well to good and organized negotiations in order to achieve tangible progress away from repeating discussions and cumbersome procedures. We should use a constructive, consensual language and refrain from controversial languages in order to reach a text that reinforce our common goal, which is to provide sustainable protection for older persons. In closing, we look forward to work with all delegations within a spirit of partnership in line with the
speeches at un.org that will help a lot for the benefit of everybody so that your statement will be clearly translated. And the other thing is that I haven't received any complaint by the interpreters yet, but I mean, if you could please slow down the statements, that could be really wonderful as well, please. Thank you. Now I give the floor to distinguished representative of Uruguay. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chairperson, Rapporteur. Uruguay reiterates its support to the negotiation of this international legally binding instrument. Significant participation by older persons in their full diversity throughout the process and participation by young people. We seek structural transformation legislative gaps and providing clarity and guidance to states and their obligations. This instrument must be based on the premise that older persons enjoy all human rights and fundamental freedoms on an equal footing with the right to take decisions on one's own life, full participation in society, access to adequate support, and the right to a life free of violence, discrimination, and abuse. The instrument must address current and emerging challenges to particularly face older persons, including armed conflict, digital transformation, digital gap, and climate change. It is crucial to incorporate the gender perspective and an intersectoral approach, and noting that older persons are not a homogeneous group and that many of them face intersecting forms of discrimination, particularly older women, older persons with disabilities, must complement existing human rights treaties, overcoming gaps, complementing the Inter-American Convention on the Rights of Older Persons, for all older persons. I thank you.
Muchas gracias, distinguida representante.
I thank the distinguished representative of Uruguay. Thank you for your valuable contributions to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The translation didn't come through. And congratulations on your guiding voices. It's a pleasure to work under you. Germany aligns herself with the statement given by the European Union. In our national capacity, we also would like to thank the organizers for very much the active participation of the numerous civil society organizations we see in the room, the national human rights institutions, and the representatives. I'd like to point out that the universality of human rights is the main principle that must prevail. The standards and norms included in the new legally binding instrument should in order to avoid contradiction and confusion regarding the content and interpretation of rights by treaty bodies. No existing norm may be weakened. That includes the human rights acquis as well as the ILO standards for social and labor rights. Should be incorporated into the new binding rights must be the core principle of the new legally Convention, which is the youngest internationally binding principles. And we think we should be instrument. I would also like to draw your attention to the MIPA process. Join the voices pleading for an early
That I give to the Austrian, I give you the floor to distinguished representative of
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chairperson. This process, noting that aging is one of the autonomy, independence, equality, and non-discrimination. Support a structure which, without have shown themselves to be effective to ensure the interdependent and accessible, promote effective dialogue with states, and facilitate the exchange of good practice. Our commitment to internationally, we have strengthened the public policies for older persons through the work of the National Council for Aging Persons. Flexible fashion, seeking consensus within this process. I thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, distinguido representante.
Group, and assures you of our continued cooperation as we begin this first substantive section. My delegation welcomes the opportunity to begin this important Indeed, whether or one is required, there is broad recognition that other persons are entitled to the full enjoyment of their human rights and fundamental freedom. The task longer and our societies continue to evolve, it becomes imperative to strengthen healthcare, social protection, long-term care, and other support systems particularly in Africa. The family remains the primary and natural source of care and support for other persons. It should therefore strengthen the process builds on existing international human rights law while carefully addressing any identified gaps in a manner that commands the broadest consensus. And needs of the old persons. I thank you.
distinguished representative of Nigeria. Now give the floor to distinguished representative of Namibia. You got the floor. I give the floor to distinguished representative of United Arab Emirates. You have the floor.
تفضل سيدي. Chair, we welcome the launch of persons. We congratulate you, Chairperson, for assuming the chairmanship of the working group. We are committed to the rights of other persons and their empowerment. This instrument is important for reinforcing persons and Madrid International Aging Work Plan, while taking into account different legal systems of various countries. The success participation, inclusion, and tapping into the experience of older persons, solidarity between generations, and supporting family as a cornerstone empowering older persons to tap into technology and digital services and to lifelong learning, providing them with social protection principles together with the rights of older persons, and implementing mechanisms for follow-up, international cooperation, and monitoring, while and the media in supporting older persons without compromising the responsibility of the state and reinforcing the rights of older persons. In
contribution, distinguished representative of United Arab Emirates. Now give you the floor to the distinguished representative of the Gulf Cooperation States. You have the floor.
We welcome the start of the Intergovernmental Working Group on Mr. President, the want to deal with existing of the society. They are a pillar useful to be guided by that it be based on the principles of dignity, of protection from all forms of violence, is very keen on the implementation of the instrument. Ambition is not national legal systems as well as the specificities of states. Any balanced approach must recognize the role and inclusive between all legislations and public policies. We look forward to a constructive negotiation
the GCC. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of France. You have the floor.
Monsieur le Président,
the indivisible and interdependent nature of human rights and multilateralism. The future instruments will be part of the universal framework of human rights to reaffirm that older persons are right must therefore strengthen the recognition of older persons as actors in their life course, taking into account the diversity of age-related situations at the intersection with gender, disability, social or geographical origin. Identified, in particular the principles of respect for dignity, autonomy and agency, equality and non-discrimination, participation and inclusion, palliative care. Particular attention must be paid to definitions to arrive at definitions that are flexible enough to take into account the diversity of national In the context of the United Nations UN80 initiative, it is essential to propose avenues for reform in favour of a more effective and functioning multilateral system for the benefit of all populations.
France, I give you the floor, distinguished representative of Greece. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, Greece aligns with the statement delivered by the European Union. We thank you for convening this first substantive session of the internationally. Such an instrument should be firmly grounded in the existing international human rights acquis. It should not substitute or weaken that framework, but clarify how it applies to all the persons and against ageism, promotion of active aging, participation, accessibility, independent living, and the avoidance of institutionalization. Older persons must no ability of this instrument. An established architecture already exists at international level along the lines of the core UN human rights treaties. We are mindful of legitimate concerns regarding coordination mechanisms, such as focal realistic, animated by spirit of consensus, bridging the diverse perceptions of our plural international community without retreating from what has already been achieved in the field of human rights. We look forward to engaging actively in this work. We thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a very helpful food for thought documents, and I can assure you of our full support. Thank you, Mr.
Sweden welcomes the work to strengthen older persons' enjoyment of human rights. Ageism and age discrimination are serious issues that we are committed to addressing, both internationally and at home. At this working are already protected under existing human rights framework, and our shared responsibility is to ensure that this framework is implemented effectively in practice. The most pressing Secondly, Sweden welcomes that the discussion this week are framed under the heading, Not Building from Scratch. We attach great value to the work already carried out by the open-ended participation of older persons themselves, the representative organizations, and broader civil society. Sweden echoes the call, nothing about us without us. Strengthening security, participation, and independence for older persons. Recent measures include continued investment in the Elderly Care Initiative to reinforce knowledge within municipalities for staff in elderly care and protected professional titles for nursing assistants. We also keep regular dialogue with organizations representing older persons through the government's Committee for Pensioners.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Sweden. We fully agree with the fact that older persons should participate in all the panels and in all these different formats in the representative of Cabo Verde. You have the floor.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chairperson. Realization in the face of the world's rapidly aging population, it is essential to enable older persons to live in dignity, independence, security, and participate fully in family, community, and economic life. The National Strategic Plan for Active Aging and the Health of Older Persons and the National Care System. These integrated care for people aged 65 and over in a situation of dependency. At the same time, efforts are being made to expand the coverage of the non-contributory social pension, improve access to primary health care and essential care for chronic and degenerative diseases and suffer from isolation, abandonment, and loneliness, especially in rural areas and less populated islands. Violence, abuse, and neglect of older adults also remain a concern. International instruments should enshrine the principles of dignity, autonomy, equality, participation, and non-discrimination on the basis of age. It should also establish clear obligations of states the rights of older persons is an imperative of justice intergenerational solidarity and sustainable development. Cabo Verde reaffirms its readiness to contribute
Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor, and I'd like to thank you for your leadership. Canada is encouraged by the persons are rights holders entitled to the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms. The outcome of the work of this working group should build on existing human rights obligations, while clarifying how those rights apply in older age to address persistent gaps Experiences of aging are shaped by factors such as race, gender, social class, ethnicity, disability, and other factors. Such an approach is essential to understanding and addressing the multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination that older persons may face. Our discussions should affirm principles of dignity, equality, and non-discrimination, autonomy and independence, accessibility, inclusion, participation, and accountability. Canada inclusion and emergency preparedness. We know that recent experiences, including the COVID-19 pandemic and climate-related disasters, have underscored the need for rights-based approaches that ensure older persons are not left behind. As the working group begins its work, Canada welcomes the opportunity to exchange views to adopt a clear, realistic calendar and effective working methods, and in doing so, we encourage drawing upon the substantial body of work and agreed outcomes developed through the open-ended working group on aging. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Canada. Now I give you the floor to the distinguished representative of the Czech Republic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Rapporteur. The Czech Republic aligns with the EU statement. The Czech Republic welcomes the establishment of the Intergovernmental Working Group and stands ready to engage constructively in its mandate. The future instrument should bring clear added value to the existing international human rights framework while clarifying age-specific gaps in protection. Its work should be guided by a clear human rights-based approach. Inspired by the CRPD, age should never constitute a barrier in access to human rights and freedoms. Older persons should be recognized first and foremost as rights holders, not merely as beneficiaries of care, welfare, or protection. The prohibition to be central issues for future discussions. Supported decision-making and safeguards against abuse should be promoted while avoiding approaches that treat older persons as passive objects of protection. References to available resources may guide the progressive protection from violence and neglect, access to justice, autonomy, and informed consent should not be made dependent on budgetary considerations. Cross-cutting issues, including gender equality, disability, rural and urban divides, digital may be relevant for implementation, but it must not be used to relativize universal human rights standards. The Czech Republic attaches particular importance to meaningful participation of older persons and their representative organizations throughout the process. Finally, the Czech Republic believes that the working group should proceed in an inclusive, transparent, and evidence-based manner. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of the Czech Republic, and I give the floor to distinguished representative of India. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. India welcomes the first session of the IGWG on older persons and appreciates efforts of the Chair in this regard and look forward to working under your leadership. As we begin these deliberations, we are reminded of a fundamental truth. We are here today because of the foundation laid down by our older generations. We owe our present progress to the foundation laid down by our older generations, a principle of gratitude and intergenerational solidarity that is deeply rooted in India's civilizational ethos. India is home to over 135 million older persons, a number projected to rise nearly 300 million by 2050, representing about 20% of the population. This demographic transformation underscores the need for robust national frameworks and strengthened international cooperation. Guided by this imperative, India has put in place comprehensive measures to ensure that older persons lead empowered, dignified, healthy, and self-reliant lives. India has taken a number of steps to ensure welfare of older persons, and we are happy to share them. While drafting the legally binding instrument, IGWG may take clues from those positive measures taken by India. Having reviewed the chairperson's draft, we welcome the flexibility in defining senior citizens within the national context and the emphasis placed on national and cultural diversity. However, we recommend taking cautious steps when translating any non-binding obligations from existing human rights treaties into binding commitments. Mr. Chair, in conclusion, India looks forward to engaging constructively in the deliberation of this working group to advance the well-being of older persons. We emphasize that any outcome of this process must be consensus-driven, firmly respecting the sovereign, legal, and socio-economic context of member states, while promoting inclusive and intergenerational societies. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of India. Certainly you have quite a lot of experience with so many inhabitants with the that already older persons. Now I give the floor to distinguished representative of Belgium. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Rapporteur. Belgium aligns itself with the statement delivered on behalf of the European Union. Belgium attaches great importance to the promotion and protection of the human rights of all persons, including older persons, and to the principle of non-discrimination throughout the life course. As our societies age, it is essential to ensure that older persons are fully recognized as right holders entitled to the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights. Belgium continues to engage constructively in the discussions of this open-ended intergovernmental working group and during ongoing efforts to examine how the international protection of the human rights of older persons can be further strengthened. As we are developing our approach to a new legally binding instrument, we consider that any future legally binding instrument on the human rights of older persons must be based and fully aligned with international human rights law and relevant regional instruments. Existing instruments, including the ICCPR, the ICESECR, CRPD, and CEDAW, already provide an important normative basis for the protection of older persons and should be used more effectively to integrate an age perspective throughout their work. Important opportunities exist to further mainstream the rights of older persons across the treaty body system, ensuring that age-related dimensions are addressed in a more systemic, visible, and consistent manner. Furthermore, Belgium wishes to emphasize the importance of the principles of equality, non-discrimination, and participation. Older persons may face multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination, and any future instrument should take an inclusive and intersectional approach. Belgium also underlines the importance of mainstreaming a gender perspective throughout the work of the working group and in the development of any future standard-setting process. Lastly, Belgium wishes to reiterate the importance of a meaningful and effective participation of older persons, the organizations representing them, and civil society more broadly. Chair Rapporteur, Belgium looks forward to engaging constructively in the discussions of this session and reaffirms its commitment to advancing the dignity, autonomy, equality, and human rights of other persons. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Belgium. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Gambia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. The Gambia congratulates you on your election as Chair Rapporteur for this first session of the Intergovernmental Working Group on the Human Rights of Older Persons. We are confident that under your distinguished leadership, this process will be conducted in an inclusive, transparent, and forward-looking manner. As a member of the cross-regional core group, which presented Human Rights Council Resolution 58/13, the Gambia attaches particular importance to the successful implementation of the mandate entrusted to this working group. Accordingly, we assure you of our full support and cooperation as you guide the working group through this important session. We also thank the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for its contributions towards the convening of this session. The adoption of Resolution 58/13 marked a decisive step in the international community's efforts to address the long-standing protection gaps affecting older persons. Through that resolution, the Human Rights Council has provided a clear direction for us to begin the onerous task of shaping an international legally binding instrument that is comprehensive, rights-based, and responsive to the lived realities of older persons in all regions of the world. Mr. Chairperson, the growing demographic transformation worldwide is not only transforming the composition of our populations, it carries with it profound human rights implications that cannot be ignored. In spite of the invaluable and varied roles played by older persons in our societies, many of them continue to face discrimination, exclusion, violence, and systemic rights abuses, leading to barriers in accessing healthcare, jobs, social protection, and other essential services. At the national level, the 1997 Constitution of the Gambia broadly protects the rights of all persons, while the Women's Act works to protect older women from negative cultural norms. The Gambia has also ratified the AU Protocol on the Rights of Older Persons in 2024 to protect older persons from discrimination and guarantee their rights. Family and community-based support systems remain central to the care and inclusion of older persons in the Gambia. These systems reflect deeply rooted traditions of solidarity, responsibility, and respect. However, migration, economic pressures, and changing family structures mean that social support networks cannot be a substitute for effective public policy and normative frameworks. Even though existing international human and the protection from abuse require clearer and more comprehensive treatment. In this regard, the future instrument must lead the way in driving a paradigm shift of the view of older persons as